You're listening to WKDW Radio 97.5 and KDWRadio.com, broadcasting from the Bishop West Real Estate Mobile Tower right here in Northport, Florida. I've got a very special guest in the house, first time on the show. I'm going to let him introduce himself and give a little background of what he does. Chad, it's all yours.
Uh, Thank you for having me on, John. Well, my name is Chad Pardue. So I work for C.A.R.E, um, and I work out of the sheriff's office. So I work out of the major crimes division at the sheriff's headquarters in Charlotte County. And more specifically, I work out of the domestic violence unit inside of major crimes. So it's myself, a detective, and an analyst. And all three of us work together. And I've been doing this job for 4 years now. And on top of dealing with the domestic violence side, I also deal with just the violent crime that also occurs in the county that may not be in C.A.R.E's purview, but um, it's important to the sheriff's office and it's important to the position and the relationship and other things like that.
So you've got 4 years with the sheriff's department. I want to say that I'm there's a part of me that's a little depressed that we have to have this division, but there are so many different um, sides of what you do. It's just not one dimensional, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what's you have to have a different passion to do what you're doing. What's your drive to stay within the scope of this job?
Uh, Man, that's a good question. Well, I mean, I started off, I was 19 years old. I went to the service. I was in service for 10 years. And when I got out of that, I moved down to Florida. Um, and then I just started working for nonprofits. I worked for Kids Wish. And then Hurricane Irma happened. And then I started doing case management and hurricane relief after Irma. And I used to live up in Clearwater and St. Petersburg, and that's where I did that. And then they needed someone to be in charge of the area from Immokalee down to the Everglades regarding that hurricane relief and the case management. So I decided to do that, and that's what brought me down to here. And then when that was over with, I saw this position. Um, I had law enforcement background. I understand the people that are in law enforcement, the personality, different types of people. I knew I'd be a good fit for there, and it was 5 minutes from home, so it was a very good fit for commuting. I was tired of commuting 45 minutes to an hour to work.
So you've got the kind of the best of both worlds now, right? Because you don't have to commute that bad. Traffic's not nearly as bad as Clearwater either.
Absolutely.
And what is it like in Charlotte County to go to work within your job every day? What do you what is what is it that you do when you get up first thing in the morning? You go into work and kind of give us an overview of what your day is.
Okay. So my primary job is to try and find people that have fallen through the cracks. So there are victim advocates at the state's attorney's office that are both employed by C.A.R.E and by the state's attorney. So if there is an arrest made, there is a victim advocate that's assigned to every state prosecutor that will deal with that case. So I can typically be hands off with those cases because I know someone is picking that up. There is someone that goes to first appearance and will call the victims of an arrest and let them know the details of um, the person that victimized that, what their bail is, maybe their next court date, if there's a protection order that's automatically put in place. So there's someone that takes care of that issue as well. So my main focus is to read all of the domestic reports and just through my years of training and experience, try and find some underlying abuse in the way that the deputy has written the report. So if I read a report where it's two people who've been living together for a while and they're having a verbal argument and the boyfriend or husband smashes the TV and punches 6 holes in the drywall. Well, the police may not be able to do anything because that's technically his property. However, that's abnormal behavior, right? It's violent behavior. So there is most likely some things that we are not seeing that occur when no one else is around. Right? We're seeing just the tip. And so I could read that, and depending on how well written and articulated it is from the deputy, I could decide to make contact with the victim or the potential victim, right? And everything may be fine, and that could be a one-off incident, or there could be multiple reports, and things could be alluding to abuse that's just happening below the surface that no one, maybe she's been too scared to come forward about to the police. And that's where I can come in, and I'll try and help those people. And it's worked in the past. I have definitely read reports where someone will say something to the effect of, "He has not hit me today." Right? And when someone used that kind of language, and thankfully the deputy wrote it in the report verbatim, so I was able to read it verbatim. And then the phrase "today" alerted me. No one says that, right, in conversation.
Correct.
So then I knew something was going on. So I made contact with her. And after about a week of communicating back and forth and making her feel comfortable with the process and what would be next and what your potential outcomes could be and how to keep you safe during those outcomes, she decided to come forward and then speak to a detective. And we were able to effect an arrest from that.
So what kind of training goes into the sheriff's office and the actual, uh, you know, uh, people on the street? I mean, we've got street sheriffs out there every day. What do we do for direct training with them?
Like, what do I do?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
is there something set up in the sheriff's office for training on writing these things down and trying to get fine detail?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's a never ending learning process, I would say, for the deputies. Some people, just in general, are better creative writers than others, right? So, and then some people are just more articulate with their writing than others. So, of course, you have some deputies that are far better at writing reports than others, but everybody is generally, does the minimum requirement in their reports, of course. So we do training every year, the domestic violence unit, and then we will, as things progress, maybe we see a habit of mistakes, and then we can address those in training. Or we can compile together, maybe some mistakes that we're constantly seeing, and then we can then put that into a presentation, and we send that out to the supervisors, and the supervisors can train their squads on it, right? Because there's all these different squads that are on rotations, and to get everybody in all at once can be a logistical nightmare sometimes, right? Because there always has to be somebody on duty out there, right? So we will give those trainings. So we'll see a shortcomings maybe in the writing or certain things that we're looking for, and we'll train to that. We will make sure we go over why that's necessary, what we're looking for. And then in other instances, I will specifically bring up some of the worst cases that we've had in the county where there has been a homicide involved. And we will go over some of those cases and kind of lessons learned from those. What could we have done better? In some instances, we were able to touch those cases a bit. And then in some where the police were never involved up until the point that the murder happened. And then those cases are a good eye opener so people can understand that you may only speak to the person one time, but look at all of this stuff that must have been happening in the background that nobody saw. Um, and so you just want to make them more aware of those things and everything that you're seeing, because you get to see the big scope and the big picture because you're getting the information from the entire county, and versus maybe a squad, they just see what's in front of them.
What's the relationship like with CARE and the sheriff's department and the deputies?
Very good, respectful, I'd say. The sheriff knows who C.A.R.E is. Um, they go to their events and vice versa. Right? The sheriff will come out to events that C.A.R.E has done. And just through me working the position for so long and doing the training, I have had dealings with most of the deputies. So now the deputies get to put a face to C.A.R.E. And just as that occurs more frequently, the more deputies just become more aware of who I am, who C.A.R.E is.
Do you think that because of your position and the work that you're doing and the training that goes into that, do you think that the sheriff's department is actually um, more fine tuned now to not only address this situation but document it?
When you say this situation, do you
Well,
mean?
abuse or any of these
Okay.
things that are going
Yeah.
on when these deputies are going out, of course they're assessing everything
Mhm.
and trying to analyze maybe the situations that are kind of masked over
Mhm.
uh, with potential risk, and they're more honed in on the language. They're more honed in on answers. They're just more honed in on every finite detail. I think more so because you're involved, you're there, and like you said, you put a face to the name, and I is that connection there made that relationship stronger?
Absolutely. I think just as society and culture changes, so is the mindset of who is a deputy. Um, so they're going to be more open to the subtle language that someone is giving off that there might be something going on. We have learned from past mistakes where we need to interview the female victim away from the male, so they can't. No one's in earshot of each other. Um, we don't want them to have line of sight of each other, possibly if it's possible in the environment, in order so she can be comfortable and maybe giving whatever information she wants to give. Um, so I would say yes, just through sheer experience alone and through the concept learning that we've done probably over the decades, police officers and deputies have gotten way better and way more aware at what the abuse looks like, um, how someone reacts to abuse, how and why someone might stay in that situation or be afraid of coming forward from that situation. So they're definitely more understanding um, as deputies because they receive more training in the academy and from organizations like C.A.R.E.
How many domestic violence calls do we have daily?
Daily can fluctuate.
Okay, well,
Yearly, around 3,500 to 4,000.
in the county of Charlotte.
Yes. Yep. And around 650 to 750 arrests a year.
And the typical arrest for domestic violence, is that short or long term, or how does that process? I'm saying this because the the to me the easiest way to get somebody's attention is uh, your action is going to result in this.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, so kind of lay that out if you can.
So when you say short term, long term, you mean misdemeanor and felony?
Yeah, I mean you're dealing with I guess multi level there at some point, right?
As far as what charges could be brought against, yes, absolutely. So unfortunately, the first time you abuse someone, it is a misdemeanor, unless you, for it to be a felony battery, it has to be your second time that you've committed a battery, or it has to be so egregious that it leaves some sort of permanent disfigurement, breaks a bone, maybe you had to go get stitches. Those type of things can elevate it. But if you just sock somebody in the face and they have a black eye, that's a misdemeanor battery. So what happens with those? That's up to the state's attorney's office. That's you're looking at, you're averaging 700 arrests a year from domestic violence, and that's just domestic violence. That's not including gun, drugs, DUI, robbery, any of the other things the state's attorney has to deal with. So they're already inundated with enough cases to last a year right off the bat from just one crime. We see a lot right now. It's about half and half between people who have never committed a crime in their life. This is their very first time, at least in our county, committing a crime, and people that we just are repeat offenders. Right? Sometimes we see the same couple. They, whatever issues that they have in their personal life, they have, and they stick together as a couple and they take it out on each other. And we have some couples where 1 month the boyfriend gets arrested and the next month the girlfriend gets arrested, and they just kind of go back and forth like that.
It's got to be one a rough a rough lifestyle,
Yes.
along with the fact that it's got to be very difficult for the deputies to walk into that scenario. Um, one, knowing that they're walking into the kind of chaos,
Yes.
but not knowing which one's doing what at what moment at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I would say cases like that, probably cause deputies to become a little jaded, right? Because you do have your cases where you have the person that is being kept from their family, and their finances are being kept from them, and they're emotionally being abused, they're financially being abused, they're physically being abused, and they can't escape no matter how hard they try. All their friends, their family, all their resources have been cut off. Right? We have those cases where you attempt to make help, and the deputies do a fantastic job of trying to provide pamphlet resources when they go, maybe just trying to express different avenues of how to get help, whenever the person feels like they can. And then there are some cases where someone just maybe isn't ready for help, or there is a substance abuse issue that's also underlining with the abuse issue. So, there's multiple issues to try and tackle in someone's life, and whatever holds someone in that type of relationship, I can't say. I guess they all have their reasons, um, but we would strongly urge people to remove themselves from those situations whenever they could.
What's one of the biggest frustrations within your position and the deputies in dealing with the domestic violence side?
One of the biggest frustrations, well, they say that it takes 7 times,
Yeah.
right, for someone
Yep.
to leave their partner. So I'd say that's one of the biggest frustrations is a deputy will go out there and he'll make an arrest. He will do everything that he needed to do to help this woman, help this victim, and I'm sure he feels a little defeated whenever the deputy hears that she's right back to that address. The protection order was dropped, the charges were dropped. Um, that I'm sure that can feel a little defeating, and that's also one of the main frustrations that we have, and definitely that I have. taken plenty of phone calls where the person tells me that it won't happen again, and it usually only happens when the person is drinking, or they'll try and excuse the behavior, which is what you see. And it's the tricky area to be in. You can't. All you can do is just try and support. You just try and inform them of what the statistics are, of the situation that they're involved in. You want to let them know that you're there to just try and help them, and that the door is always open if and when they feel like they need help, right? So you don't want them to feel like they can't get help, because I'll run into cases too where the victim knows that they had dropped the charges in the past, and they feel terrible about it, and they feel embarrassed, and then they feel like no one wants to help them anymore because of those things. And then you just kind of have to let them know that we're still here to help, that we understand the situation, and we understand that most people are going to go back to that situation, and that whenever you're ready is when you're ready, and of course we're always ready to help.
So anybody that is listening right now who has maybe been through this, or they're on their sixth or seventh time going through it, your advice would be go ahead and call. Don't worry, we're here. We're not going to give up.
Yeah, there are plenty of people out there that will help, right? So if you feel like you don't have a support system, and that's your reason why, there is a support system out there, and it is daunting getting help from strangers, and counting on the kindness of strangers, but that is our job. And we can help be there every step of the way, right? Over at C.A.R.E, if you need assistance in finding a place, they'll help you. If you need legal assistance, they'll help you. If you need a safe place to stay and they have availability, they'll help you. If you need help with a protection order, they'll help you. They will help you articulate yourself, so that way when you go in front of the judge, you have your best foot forward. I attend court every Thursday, right? So I'm always there. I'm always reading the petitions, trying to help. Um, if you have issues with law enforcement, whether a deputy was disrespectful or didn't treat you well, or you felt like wasn't listening to you, you can call me and I will help rectify the situation. Right? So there are plenty of avenues and plenty of people out there that are always willing to just help, whatever it is.
Is there, and I'm going to ask this because within the national scale of sheriff and law enforcement across the country, um, we see a kind of a defiance of law enforcement at times, which blows my mind, because the first people they call when there's a problem is the law enforcement that they can't stand. But in saying that, the mental health side within the sheriff's department, with all the deputies,
Yes.
with what they see and what they deal with, and the stressors that may come along with that, because they're seeing things that are somewhat portrayed in the movies that we see today. But then there's another level of that too. Is there a mental health side of that that's taken care of through the sheriff's department for the deputies?
Absolutely. So the deputies can speak to a licensed clinical therapist. They have their resources that they can speak to, and I believe it. Part of protocol, if you have a major incident, you probably have to speak to someone. There is a mental health unit at the sheriff's office that's fairly new now. It's called the C.A.R.E unit, and they have civilians that go out with deputies, will handle mental health calls, right? So it's a little less heavy-handed. So if someone's just having a bad day, right, maybe they just need someone to just take a little bit more time and empathy and speak to them with a softer voice and less of an authoritative voice. And I've seen that unit specifically do pretty big things out in the community.
So that's is that more of like a safety but diffusion at the same time?
Can be,
Yeah.
can be. Like, you have plenty of people who maybe they're bipolar, schizophrenic, maybe they're just severe anxiety, PTSD, and they're having an episode, right? And an authoritative figure showing up, issuing verbal commands with a threat of a consequence at the end. They may be in a mental aspect where they are not going to, um, that's just not going to go well. And
Defenses
so,
come up.
yeah. And so they've had a lot better instances where with that unit de-escalating those situations with their civilian therapists and counselors that they take out there with them. So they will take one or two deputies, and that will go, of course, just for the safety aspect.
Sure.
But it's the other civilians that go and de-escalate the situation and just try and help talk the person through. And I believe they come from Charlotte Behavioral.
Okay, that's awesome. So that's just another outreach program that you're connected with too, right?
Yes. So that's just another unit inside of the sheriff's office that we can utilize as well, because there's a lot of overlapping there, right? Someone who's been in an abusive relationship for so long may have some mental health issues. Maybe they would like to speak to a licensed therapist, and they would get far more out of that than speaking to a detective. Maybe that person can help them understand what's been occurring, and then they can see it for what it is and take care of the issue from there. Since that's been occurring, the domestic violence unit has been going out and also doing follow-ups, because we feel that it's hard to understand a situation until you get eyes on it, right? There's only so much you can understand about someone or the dynamic of something from behind a spreadsheet or a paragraph. So on some instances where we feel like we need to go make personal contact with a victim, either just to check up on them or maybe get some more information, the detective and I will also go out and do that as well.
Is that announced or unannounced?
It's announced.
Okay. So they are somewhat prepared for the arrival.
Somewhat prepared. Well, we have to make sure that they're there, so we're not
Yeah.
wasting our time.
Yeah.
So they are somewhat prepared, because we don't. Domestic violence is a very dangerous situation to just walk into blindly. So we also want to make sure we don't just walk into something that's going to go wrong.
I was kind of going there because the safety factor is something you guys hold near and dear, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
And it's just not for the citizen; it's for staff.
Yes.
And how has that changed now that we're within the sheriff's department? We're kind of taking on, and across the nation, this is happening where we're taking on these new roles within the departments that you have the mental health side of it and you're addressing those. That safety factor that's in there, are these the same partners that go out together, or is there some training there that happens too, so that like when you go out, you're part of the sheriff's department though, correct?
Mm-mm.
No,
I'm contracted out to them.
Okay.
By C.A.R.E.
By C.A.R.E. So with you, the people that you go out with, is it usually the same?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
It's the same detective. Is that what you were going to ask?
Yeah,
Same
yeah,
people that I go out with? Yes.
yeah. So does that help in your comfort level as somebody who's working side by side with them? Have you developed that bond where you guys are able to like communicate without words, kind of
Yes.
sometimes?
Yes. I know exactly what you're saying. Well, I'm 6'3", 240 pounds. So I'm a pretty big person. So typically in my life, people have left me alone. Um, I have I was in special forces and I was in law enforcement. So I had 10 years of experience, even though I haven't done that, walking into this. So I was a bit more comfortable than, say, maybe someone who just graduated college
Right.
and falls into the position would be. So I understand that level of comfortability may differ from person to person. However, yes, I have been going out. I've been working with this detective for 3.5 years now. So the whole team, we've been working together for so long. We understand each other, we know each other, we can communicate non-verbally with just kind of looks, um, things like that, just because we've been working so closely together. And I know the same was for the mental health unit too. They're a tight knit team, right? They always work together. It's always the same group that goes out together, so that way they can understand each other, their mannerisms, their nonverbal communications, and look out for each other out there.
And there's some real importance to that. The communications verbally are one thing, but those nonverbal communications can be a determining factor between safe and non-safe real quick.
Absolutely. And you know it too when someone gives you a certain look that they don't normally give at a certain time. You know it.
100%. There's that moment where you go, oh crap, inside your head,
Yes.
that we're about to go, and you got to figure out, one, how to diffuse it, but two, how to alert everybody around you that may not have seen it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. It's interesting that for 3.5, 4 years now you've been doing this, that the the communication that you guys have developed, um, and I want to say the quietness of the into the community, how it's been introduced. I think that's kind of a cool thing too, because uh, it tells us how good that transition is. Because if it was not a good transition, the news would be all over it.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the news is out there and it likes to carry the negative more than it does the positive. But it seems to me that you've had a positive effect of dealing with the negativeness that you're up against. So there is a positive that comes out of the negative, but um, do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of, it's when you look at it as a complete picture, we never hear these things about the sheriff's department being this. I'm going to go back to the outreach kind of sheriff's department. These deputies are really trying to not, I think, not arrest when not needed, arrest when needed, but I also believe how they feel about their approach and their frustration is, man, what can we do to wake people up to, one, to get them to stop, and two, get away. Are you know what I'm saying? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
that is I've been doing this show for 4 years, and the biggest thing that I take away from almost every show is the fact that people who stay are not just putting just themselves at risk. A lot of times they're putting a lot of other people layered at risk, uh,
Yeah.
every single time it happens, because doesn't doesn't in, in most of those domestic cases, doesn't it elevate from episode 1 to episode 3 to episode 5 to episode 7?
Yes. Yeah. Typically, the abuse starts subtle and then graduates higher and higher. So it may start with some just simple controlling of who you can hang out with, how late you can be out, where you can go, what you can wear. Maybe it's a slap or it's a fight over the cell phone, right? That's a physical engagement. And then after that first act of physical violence, you get, I would assume as an abuser, you get more comfortable in performing that act of violence. And then it just keeps elevating. It's a slippery slope. When one person gets away with one thing, they're just going to keep pushing it and just see how far the envelope can go. Or in some instances, they just truly don't care. They don't care about the prison system. They don't care about anything. And those people, maybe they saw abuse when they were children themselves, and that's really the only thing that they know how to control, and they don't have any impulse control.
So the ones who just don't care, and you know who they are, I'm
Absolutely.
sure. Repeat offenders. Are those the ones that you, when you get that call, you're going in, so you're more prepared for that moment, but you also have that little voice in the back of your head that, all right, that it escalated to this the last time, we have to be ready for this time.
Yes. Yep. So whenever you see, like, you can see a case where, like, you have some domestic violence cases where it's maybe they're fighting over a cell phone because both of them are accusing each other of infidelity, and one person snatches the phone out of the other. Maybe there's a shove or a push of the arm as one person tries to get the phone back. Okay, well, that could affect an arrest. That's not, when we think of domestic abuse, we're thinking of slaps, punches, and things like that. So you can read a report where that kind of violence, very pointed violence, right? Someone went in, like the abuser went in there and he was going to beat her until no one else wanted her, essentially. And those are definitely the scary ones. And then you'll see it, and then you'll follow the case, and then you'll see the outcome of the case, and it may not be a good outcome. And then in the back of your head, the next time you have to deal with this, it's going to be even worse. But of course, you just hope that you never have to deal with it again, and maybe this was the last time, and maybe there are things occurring that, of course, you don't see, and that this person's going and getting help. The murders that we have seen in the county have mostly occurred by people who have had no prior instances.
So that's amazing.
Totally quiet, and they've gone from 0 to 1,000 instantly. The ones that are a constant issue and a constant problem with small little like dabbles of abuse, I
So
mean, there's still an issue, of course,
right.
But in the murders that we've seen, it's the quiet ones. It's the quiet cases. It's the ones that have made no noise, and then all of a sudden they just
Snap.
snap.
So let's stay there for a second, because we never really talk about, I guess, the intenseness of, we talk about the abuse side and we try to push that across. But on the murder side, I guess a more definite reaction to what was going on. Um, how do you, when you first go out, is there things that you're looking for in somebody that you think might snap? I'm just curious, because it's, you just said you don't see it, you don't have an alarm, but is there that little voice in the back of your head after all these years doing it that you go, we really got to watch this one?
Well, you always have that voice that tells you to watch this one, and of course I do. But then when I have to look back at experience, the all the murders that have occurred, I may have looked at those people and nothing ever would go off, no squirrel, no nothing.
Wow.
Because I never interacted with those people. So
Where, so what does that, and on on your mental side of it when that occurs, being in your position, how do you deal with that?
Uh, just compartmentalize it. Just take it. Just is what it is. You just gotta complete your job.
Well, the reason I ask you that is because the the job itself that you have is not your typical job that's out there, uh, all over the newspapers. Hey, sign up. um, it is a job that you have to really commit yourself to, and at a at the same time, not take personal.
Yes. Yes.
And you've got the military background, you got special forces, so you've had that. I want to say um, a little bit of intense training there on how to deal with the mental aspect of it,
Yes.
where other people who may have been involved in this have never had any of that conflict training and resolution at some point.
Hmm.
What do we do for them?
Man, I don't know. Other than just, be there. If someone needs to vent, I always found, venting through humor, right? They call it dark humor. When I was in the military, of course, that's how everybody dealt with precarious situations. You just try and make light of it. Of course, you do it at an appropriate time. You can't make light of things at every single moment because some moments are inappropriate. Um, but you just try not to take it personally. If you need to speak with someone, speak with someone, and don't be afraid to like vent how you feel about these things to other people because I guarantee everybody else is thinking the same thing that you are. Um, dealing with these things on a daily basis is not normal. It's not going to um, make someone happy. So it is important to talk about these things, which is why I like our little tight knit team where I have the detective and the analyst because usually at work all three of us can kind of help each other relieve steam. We can vent our frustrations to each other, back and forth that we have with the systems or with cases and things like that.
Yeah, that camaraderie comes into play a lot, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Without that camaraderie, this would be a lot harder to manage.
And it's funny you use harder to manage, because basically that's what you're trying to do every time you go out on a call is manage what's happening at that moment. And even with a murder case, you're still in the management role at that point, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
Is there when there's domestic violence and there's a murder that occurs, what never been involved or heard anyone in my walk of life have to deal with this. So when you have that aspect happen, the family or friends that are close by at that moment, how do you deal with their reactions or possibly the overreaction of what they may do? Because I can see where somebody could get very very upset and want to handle things on their own. Um,
Absolutely.
what do you encourage there?
Uh, Civility, maybe just a time to think. Um, I dealt with a, I dealt with a specific case where it was the son. I had to deal with the son, and his father had just murdered his mother, and there was an adult son, and I joined him and the detectives to walk around the crime scene as he was giving what happened and occurred. Right. So of course, and it had just happened within 24 hours. So he's very distraught, very emotional. Um, you have to understand that there's not really anything you can't say in those moments to those people. You can't. You just have to listen. You just have to be there. I can tell that person that I'm here for you and I understand what you're going through and I feel bad for you, but that may come off patronizing. It may come off disingenuous. Here's somebody coming and just saying these things that they have to say. So I just try and be there for whatever it is that they need. If they need to vent, let them vent. If they want to tell me how bad the system is and everybody that's involved in it, that's fine. By all means, you've every right to be frustrated as you want. Um, I don't try and give any recommendations or tell them anything. I just empathetic ear and just try and help them with whatever the next step in that process is going to be, because there are, even though those are tragedies that occur, of course there are things that have to also help occur that you're going to help the surviving victims get through, such as funerals, cleaning up of the property. Maybe they can help. There might be some other financial resources that can help with facilitating the payment for that, because that can be quite expensive, and if you're not prepared for that financial expense, that can be quite an enormous one to bear.
And that is a problem, but domestic violence murders happen at all walks of life, don't they?
Yes.
There's no financial cutoff. Hey, I make $75,000 a year. We're not going to have a problem. There isn't one of those, is there?
Nope.
So you never know when it's going to happen. You never know who's going to snap.
Yep.
And a lot of times, I think, in listening to what you're saying and what I've heard from staff over the last 4 years, the victim a lot of times knows where it's at the moment it's going. I got to believe that, and that fear factor has got to elevate at some point for them, and there's that fine moment, I think, in listening to conversations with all of you, that the victim has a really small period of time to make a choice a lot of times, and that could be the difference between life or death for them.
Absolutely.
Or injury versus non-injury. Is what would you tell people in Charlotte County based on this conversation? What would you tell them now to, one, get them to wake up, to listen, to pay attention, and to understand you guys are working as a task force together, one, to prevent this, but also, if there is a problem, you're ready to engage? What would you tell them?
Well, I would say, if you see red flags in an abusive relationship, act on them, right? And it doesn't matter what juncture you are in the relationship. I understand, if you've been together with someone for years and you don't want to throw away that time and make it seem like all of that was for nothing, however, you got to do what's best for yourself and the safety of yourself, and especially if you have children, what's best for the children. Some people don't, you're not going to change people. So sometimes I see where they think that the person will just change, that if they just stick out in the relationship, the person eventually will change. And that's not, statistically, that's not something you see. Like you said, you just see an elevation, right? It just gets worse, doesn't get better. And I would like people to just understand that. And it's extremely difficult for people to see it that are in it. It is. I've known people that have worked at C.A.R.E that have been in their own situations, right? So even people who have been so highly trained to recognize these types of situations can sometimes find themselves in these exact types of situations because it can creep up on you, right? A frog does not jump out of boiling water because it just dies slowly, and that can happen. But try and recognize it and try and get out of it when you can, and know that there's support out there. And if you're afraid, there is support out there. And there are people out there that'll help. People won't just ignore you and shush you and just not pay attention to you, right? This it's 2023. It's not 1978 or anything like that. We've come a long way with training and just the way we think about these issues nowadays. So,
And I think the even further than that, the the community and surrounding communities and surrounding law enforcement um, have embraced the change. The
absolutely.
fact, and I think that's the difference from the 70s to now, is that the open dialogue, the task force at hand that are now being implemented in multiple levels, as we talked about. Um, the 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 community itself is is changing because everything around it is also changing. It's making ease of information, where a lot of the social media side of things is instant gratification and, oh my gosh, maybe too much overload. This
Mhm.
is this kind of information. Uh, Man, if this show just gets one or two people to respond and engage and think about, hey, my safety first, my kids' safety first, the rest of my family safety first. Um, that's a difference maker, and we didn't used to have that, and we do have it today.
Yep, it's good. It's a fantastic thing.
Yeah. Um, we've got about 3 minutes left. We kind of blew through this hour pretty quickly. I don't know how fast it felt for you, but
It's pretty quick.
uh, with the situation you guys have right now and the support, how can people get a hold of you? What should they do? I know we've got some great text numbers out there. They're
Mhm.
scrolling across our screen, but can you tell the radio audience how to contact CARE if you need anything?
Okay, so of course, they have a website,
Yep.
carefl.org, that you can go see, and they'll have their toll-free number up there. I believe you can even chat with them online. You can go to the sheriff's website, and you can see the domestic violence unit phone number. You could call the non-emergency line and ask to speak to someone in domestic violence or the victim advocate specifically if you wanted to just speak with me. Um, my direct number I can give out. Do you want me to? Is 941-575-5350. So you could always call that and that'll ring to me. And, I've gotten just random calls or random walk ins from the street. Hey, I need to talk to somebody. And I'll go out and talk to them and we'll discuss what's been occurring and what the next effective step is to them that they feel like they need to do. Right? Because we always want to empower them to make the decision because they're going to have to make all the decisions down the road when you're not even around, right? So you want to start off on the right foot of having them make that first decision themselves, not pushing them to do what you want them to do, right? So that it's better for them in the long term.
Well,
So
I I really appreciate your time. I can't run over because
okay,
the radio station will get after me, but I really appreciate your time and the conversation. Uh, and I hope you come back on and maybe bring one of your detectives with you so we can see that partnership. I think that would be really cool.
yeah, whenever you want, just let me know.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. This is John Rawlings with Real Talk Radio and Chad Purdue from CARE
Yes,
and associated with Charlotte County Sheriff. So support these guys, share this information, get it out. It's valuable stuff. I appreciate your time. Have a great day. We'll see you soon on Monday. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.